from what I can see now. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Vasil Petrov, and I'm the Managing Director of Lean Institute, Bulgaria. And today I have the pleasure to introduce to you Dimitar from Kanban, a person in the IT world with, I would say, a very deep and profound knowledge about Lean. One of those people that actually started exploring Lean deeply from the manufacturing perspective and then looking for ways to apply this in another, I would say, totally different industry. We had Dimitar in our conference this year in Bulgaria, and we value so much the presentation that he did for us. And I'm very happy to have him today with another topic that I believe will be very interesting and exciting for all of you to hear. It is related to the OKRs and Kanban, and then like the Kanban is the obviously the product, and the Kanban company is the one that combines this product with the OKRs. So stay tuned to understand a little bit more details around this. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to ask at the end. So thank you very much. Mitko, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vasco. Appreciate it. Hello, everyone. My name is Dimitar. I'm very delighted and proud and grateful to be here. I will be talking today about Kanban and OKRs and how they can help you achieve better agility and leanify your companies even more. So let me share my screen and walk you through a quick presentation. Please confirm that you can see my screen. Vasco, maybe you can confirm.
Yeah, we can see it.
All right, so let me get started without wasting any more time. As I said, the presentation is about Kanban and OKRs, and when you sum those two, you get OKRA, and that's not the vegetable or the fruit. It's an acronym about OKRs plus activities or actions. So how do you make your OKRs more actionable? And believe it or not, that's actually a talk about strategy, because you will know why in just a few minutes. So let's talk about strategy. What is a good strategy? As a CEO of a company, it's my responsibility to define and make sure that the strategy of our company is executed. However, this is not taught in school. Maybe if you get an MBA from a very good university, you would know more about strategy, but in the mainstream education, you wouldn't get too much about it. So I had to learn that the hard way after many errors in what I thought was our strategy along these years. I actually came to realize that good strategy is a very simple concept. As everything simple, it's actually hard to get. It wasn't until I read a very nice book on strategy that I could grasp my head around it. It's a book by a person called Richard Rumelt, who talks about the strategy kernel, or the kernel of strategy as he calls it, and the book's name is Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. So I highly recommend that book for anybody who's in a senior management position. It really helped me make strategic thinking something real and something more tangible. It helped me not be abstract and vague and live in the realm of wishful thinking. It helped me be really actionable about strategy. And I thank Mr. Rumelt for the success of my company, because I think a lot of it should be attributed to that book. So, what is the kernel of good strategy? Well, first of all, you start with a diagnosis. The diagnosis is answering the question, what's going on here, what challenges should we be solving, and what opportunities are there in front of our company. And I want to mention that you may have multiple strategies concerning multiple challenges or multiple opportunities. So you don't have only one strategy. You have different strategies for different important topics you want to tackle. Once you've answered the most imminent questions of what's going on here, once you have the diagnosis, then you can move to define what Mr. Rommel calls a guiding policy. A guiding policy is something that everybody in the organization should know, should be aware of, and should use as a tool to make decisions more easily and faster. A guiding policy is something like we value experience over performance, or we value weight over cost. I mean, there's a very nice story about building a Boeing plane where they asked all the teams to trade kilograms for money so that they control the weight of the overall plane. So this is a guiding policy. It helps decentralization and decision making at scale. And then the last piece is a set of coherent or cohesive actions. So it's what we actually do to get there. And Mr. Rommel says that very few companies in the world have actually all three components in their strategies. And I trust Mr. Rommel because in my experience with Kanbanites, we talked to many executives, and I could only rarely see so much well thought of strategies. People usually say something aspirational as, we want to be the best manufacturer of whatever, or we want to get to a market share of Y, or we want to be the best employer for that country, blah, blah, blah. But these are just aspirational goals. This is not a strategy because it has no guiding policy. It has no attached actions to it to actually make it work. I'm lucky because in my experience so far, I've been acquainted with multiple frameworks, methods, tactical strategies, and things like that that I could employ and create my own tool set to make stuff work. And experimenting with Kanban for obvious reasons. Well, I have a company that works on a Kanban tool, and experimenting with OKRs, the OKR framework, helped me realize that these three ideas, these three concepts complement each other so well that they probably should be taught in school. So how do we implement a good strategy? Once we have identified our good strategy following the strategy kernel thinking, how do we make it work? And I think I have the answer, or at least that's my answer to it. You employ OKRs, the OKR framework, for the diagnosis thinking and for the bigger pieces of the guiding policy thinking. And then you employ Kanban for some of the guiding policies thinking and for virtually all the activities or the actions that have to be executed in order to make our strategy work. As you can see, there's an overlap between Kanban and OKRs around the guiding policies thing. And that's because both methods, I would say, have very wide capabilities. They are not focused just on actions or just on diagnosis. They can be used across this whole spectrum of thinkings, but my personal experience is reflected on the slide. So the majority of actions is Kanban, the majority of diagnosis OKRs, and somewhere in the middle we can use either of these two. If that sounds a bit weird or a bit abstract, give me a few more minutes, it will start making more sense, I promise. So what is Kanban? I think I need to go through these two concepts, Kanban and OKRs, for the benefit of everyone who's on the audience that might have not had any tangible experience with those. It will be quick, don't worry about it. I want to point out that I'm talking about Kanban written with a capital K and not about Kanban that is written with a lowercase k, so that the lowercase Kanban is manufacturing Kanban. This is what Toyota invented in the 20th century. This is the visual scheduling of materials and replenishment materials and parts. This is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the Kanban method. So the Kanban method was invented around 2010 by a person called David J. Anderson, who wrote a blue book. That's how it's well known, the blue book. That blue book talks about taking those ideas from the manufacturing Kanban and applying them to knowledge work. So everything I'm talking about here is knowledge work. It's not manufacturing / shop floor work. It's knowledge work. Office workers, design workers, managers, everybody who works with their heads primarily and not so much with their hands. So what is Kanban? I'm showing you here a screenshot of our product, Kanbanize, and my goal is to visualize what I'm talking about, not so much to sell the product. And what we see here are a few things. I'll start with the bullet list on the right. So these are the 6 Kanban practices for the Kanban method. You have to do those 6 things if you are to say that you're doing Kanban with a capital K. So the first thing is that you visualize your work. Well, these things here, these cards here that you see, they are actually work items or tasks or project deliverables, whatever you want to call them, visualized on a digital Kanban board. These here are what we call workflows, all right? So we have a workflow for objectives and we have a workflow for actions. These cards represent actions. This thing, which we call initiatives, represents an objective. All these flow from left to right, from requested to done. That's a very simple idea. The second thing is we have to be limiting work in progress. We know this very well from the manufacturing world, that the small batch sizes always bring us better lead times. So in the digital Kanban world, we allow people to limit the work in progress using those small numbers here that say you got to have less than X number of cards in that stage. We manage flow. Managing flow is a complex topic, so I won't go too deep into it, but the idea is that you move the cards from left to right as quickly as possible, and if there are impediments along the way, you resolve them through systems thinking or other approaches that you may employ. Making policies explicit is the 4th practice in Kanban, which means whoever looks at this board has to know what to do with it. We tackle this in the digital space with a specific section, but if you're using a physical board, you are obviously free to design your own workflows and policies. Feedback loops in Kanban is something that we have regular meetings for. You have daily meeting, weekly meeting, monthly meeting, quarterly meeting, and this is used to make sure information flows from team to other teams and from the teams to the management. And the 6th practice, sorry about that. The 6th practice is to improve and evolve experimentally, which talks about more like the lean startup thinking, where you run small experiments, you take the result, and then you either pivot or you persist. So this is Kanban in a very few words. It's a huge body of knowledge. So there's a thing called the Kanban maturity model. Again, this is for knowledge work. If you are interested to learn more, Google Kanban maturity model, and you will have plenty of information to learn from. All right, so what about the OKR framework? So far, I was talking about the Kanban method. It's a method because you can apply it to any process. It's not a process on its own. And the OKR framework is more like a process on its own, so we call it a framework, all right? So the OKR framework, it stands for Objectives and Key Results, OKR. And the OKR framework is a collaborative goal-setting system that helps companies to achieve more and to align better towards their strategic goals. You can use OKRs on a team level. You can use OKRs on a department level. You can use OKRs on a holistic company strategic level. We recommend having at least 2 levels, one strategic and one team. We don't necessarily recommend having OKRs on a personal level, on an individual level. We think this is counterproductive. Some people do it. We think it's counterproductive because we need to see collaboration. It's a collaborative goal-setting system, right? And if every person has their own objectives and key results, then collaboration is hindered. So what should the OKRs be? What should the objectives be? The objectives are the what. This is what we want to achieve. And they have to be those 4 things: aspirational, action-oriented, concise, and meaningful. Please note that we're not saying measurable. Why? Because the key results have to be measurable. The key results are the how. They have to be concrete, measurable, they have to be time-boxed, and aggressive, but still realistic. What's the thinking here? The thinking is that these 2 force you to clear your thoughts before you actually identify the diagnosis and the guiding policies which we talked about. This is a quick example. We could have an objective that says, we want to significantly improve the success rate of our major projects. This is aspirational, it's short, it's concise, it's meaningful. This is something we really want to do. It's action-oriented. But see, it's not measurable. To make it measurable, to make it something real, to make it objective, whether it's achieved or not, we add a few key results to each objective. In this case, we have 3 key results. It's usually a good idea to have at least a few. So 2, 3 is a good number, maybe 5, but not more than 5. So the key result would be, we want to reduce the number of customer escalations by 25%. We want to improve the quality of the product by 14%. And we want to realize project savings of 2% or more. So now, ladies and gentlemen, this is how you have a very good diagnosis and a very good guiding policy. These are the things we want to achieve. These are the things we care about. Now the problem is how we make it work, right? This is where Kanban comes into play, because it helps you manage the work in a very lean and efficient manner. If you want to learn more about OKRs, I recommend this book. It's by John Doerr. John Doerr was taught this by Andy Grove, who was the CEO of Intel. And actually, Andy Grove from Intel was the person who conceptualized this whole thing. So you can almost consider this book to be straight from the horse's mouth. So how do OKRs and Kanban work together to help us deliver the strategy that we had identified? It gets very interesting for me here, because our product as a company revolves around this idea, the idea of OKRA. OKRs plus Kanban equals OKRA, where A is the actions or the activities, right? This is in the title of the presentation. I want to show you how Kanban and OKRs work together. You're seeing again a screen from our product, Kanbanize. It's zoomed in a little. At the top, you see a workflow that's called objectives, and you can see here a workflow that's called actions. This thing here is what we call an initiative. And in this case, the initiative represents objectives. The objective we have is we want to design a new training platform. This is our aspirational goal. We need a new training platform. These 2 that you see here are the actual key results. We call them outcomes, but it's basically a key result that are attached to this objective. So we have the diagnosis and the guiding policies encoded in this initiative here. And then this initiative is broken down into multiple child cards. These rectangles here are these cards below it, actually, so that when you work on those cards as a team, you finish the work that's supposed to be done for the team to achieve those goals. So we have the diagnosis, the guiding policies, and then I keep doing that, sorry. And then we have also the coherent actions down below. At one screen, you can see it all. And again, I'm not trying to advertise my product, although of course I would appreciate your interest. The important here is how we manage those 2 together. If you open one of those initiatives, you can see more detail about the same thing. So you can see the detailed description of the objective. You can see the detailed description of the outcomes and why we need them, as well as the work that's attached to this objective. And specifically in Kanban and maybe in other tools, I'm not sure about that, you can see a hierarchy of objectives, 1, 2, 3, 10 levels of objectives from the CEO through the strategic portfolio, through the operational portfolio, to the team level. You can see goals and objectives cascaded so that everybody knows what they're supposed to do and how they can contribute to the bigger picture. What you see here, parent level -1, -2, these are all pointers to the hierarchy up above so that everybody is aligned. Alignment is a huge advantage of the OKR framework, especially paired with Kanban and capable tooling. The last thing, almost the last thing I want to show you is what you can get when you have a system like that in place. So this is the tracking of one outcome or one key result, no matter what I want to call it. This is a timeline. The white line here represents the actual values. So we want to increase the people trained from 0% to 100%, and it's currently 10%. That's the definition of the key result, right? It's measurable. And because we are building a training platform, we want to train people up to 100%. So as we gain progress more and more, we reflect that into the key result, and we see this chart being drawn for us automatically. Based on our historical data, we can get you a projection showing you how you're going over time and where you are likely to land at the end of the key result. If you recall, the key result was supposed to be time boxed. So we have a time box, and then this projection shows us what value we are going to get at the end of the time box. The baseline is this blue line, and it's quite obvious that at the end of our period, we are not going to be meeting our baseline. So if we're below this baseline, because we're trying to increase a value, if we are below the baseline, well, it means that we failed. That's why the status is red, right? It's quite natural that if you're so far off, your status will be red. I want to mention one important thing about the OKRs, that because they are, or they're supposed to be aspirational by default, if you hit 70% from your target or more, that's considered success. So if you're always striving for 100% completion or more, then probably your goals were not that aspirational in the first place. So in the OKR world, they really encourage people to set very aggressive high goals and then work towards 70% or more. And by the way, our software is codified to follow that rule. So if you're 70% or more, you'll be greenish in status. And I want to summarize very, very quickly for you why I think OKRs and Kanban fit so well together. I sometimes joke that OKRs should be objectives, Kanban, and results, as you can see in the title, but that's just a joke. So how these two concepts complement each other for real? The first thing is that Kanban makes it much more likely to actually get to your goals because it makes the execution of the work super efficient. And by the way, Andy Grove himself, the person who invented OKRs and told them to John Doerr, said to John Doerr that it almost didn't matter what people knew because it was all about execution. I find that a little bit strange because Andy Grove said that, and then he invented the OKRs with no actions. But I think it's because back in the 80s, I think, or 90s, when this happened, there was only one way to execute work. It was the waterfall process back then, and everybody was taking it for table stakes. Things have evolved with Agile since then, and that's why I think the OKR framework should be extended to encompass real guidance how you make the work. done, how you get it done. The second thing is that OKRs provide a very nice, lightweight goal-setting approach on top of Kanban, and that helps the organization to steer everything towards outcomes and not so much about output. And I've fallen in this trap myself. In the very beginning of Kanbanized, we were obsessed with delivering more. We just wanted to see more throughput, right? We almost didn't care what we were doing as long as the throughput was increasing. And that's a terrible mistake. You have to know what the diagnosis is or what the objective is. Only then throughput matters. And OKRs really deliver on that, at least for us. The third thing that I find pretty interesting and important is that because of the built-in cadences in Kanban, those were the meetings I talked about. These meetings very nicely match the goal setting cadences in the OKR space. And they give us an opportunity to actually reflect on what the current key results are showing. Many organizations I've heard about set the OKRs once a quarter, and then they forget about that until the next quarter comes. So they only reflect on what has been identified as important 4 times a year. And the 4th time is, by the way, Christmas, so nobody cares about it. So it's actually 3 times a year. And you only have 3 times a year the opportunity to learn, the chance to learn. And that's not enough, friends. This is just not enough. So with Kanban attached to the OKR framework, you have at least a weekly opportunity to reflect on what's going on, if not daily. We have the daily meeting in Kanban as well. But weekly is a must-have, and monthly is even more important. So Kanban adds this to the OKR framework. And the 4th thing is that Kanban is a lot about metrics. Kanban makes your workflows predictable. And when they are predictable, you can use those metrics to base your assumptions for the future on what has been happening in the past. We are very famous in the Kanban space for relying on Monte Carlo simulations to forecast how much work we can deliver in the next few months or the next few quarters. And now think about that. You have the data in Kanban. You have the lightweight objectives and key results in the OKR framework connected. What's more logical than using the Kanban metrics and forecasting capabilities to actually inform the objectives and key results on the likelihood of the work being done by a certain date? Well, that's what we do. Utilizing these Monte Carlo simulations, you can say, all right, you've planned that amount of work for this initiative. You have planned a deadline 2 months in the future. There is 85% probability that you will complete this work on time. That's good. But if there's only 15% probability, then you have to revise your objectives, you have to revise your plans. There's always a chance that you deliver 100% of the outcomes with 10% of the work, but that's not what happens in reality. It's usually the other way around. You do all the work, and then you can only get to 20-30%. It's just reality. And with that, friends, I'd like to close my presentation. You can find me on LinkedIn if you want to know more about Kanban and OKRs and how these two work together. I'm happy to answer any questions and have any conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mitko, for this really insightful presentation and a good overview of Kanban, OKRs, and strategy in general. We need to be respectful of time, but I do appreciate the questions that were asked. I'll just highlight 2 of them. Maybe you can take the time to answer them in the chat, or people can connect to you separately. They have your coordinates.
I will answer in the chat, and they can connect me on LinkedIn as well.
That would be great, because I do believe that in the space of strategy, we talk about Hoshin Kanri, and everybody's wondering how this relates to the X matrix and also like the timing on the actions. There was a good question there as well. So we can take this afterwards. Thank you very much once again. I hope everybody appreciated the session as much as I did, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye from Bulgaria. Ciao.
Thank you.